Yo, what up guys, it's Flark, and welcome to my Prepatch guides and Shadowlands discussions videos for both Frost and Unholy. Of course, you're watching the Unholy one right now. You guys have been asking for this for a long time, and I figured I would finally deliver, especially with Shadowlands being delayed and Prepatch being elongated. I think there's a lot of value to going over all of the new mechanics, the class design, what's powerful right now, what could be powerful in the future, traits, items, lack of corruption, all the crazy stuff people have been asking about. Provide you guys a really good build and guide for pre-patch so we can have some fun in this weird pre-season, in-between season period. Personally, I have actually created a couple builds that are completely overtuned in every way because pre-patch is not perfectly balanced. So if you're actually looking for achievements or just to blow people up in this period and just have some fun while you're waiting for Shadowlands to release, I have your back because it is destructively overpowered. Currently I do twos coaching obviously on my stream, and we regularly get people to 21 and 2200 with double DPS, and they don't have a lot of experience. So it's effectively 1v2s to 2200, which means with a little bit of team synergy, you could probably get to 27 or 2900 pretty easily. This stuff is obviously very, very busted. But what we're going to do here is we're going to do the standard guide format that I do, where I talk about traits and itemization, and then talents, PvP talents, gameplay, and then I'll actually move on to some Shadowlands discussion about the future. And hopefully that's able to help you guys use this period to actually have some fun and also practice your new class design, your new class mechanics. So when Shadowlands comes up, you already have a feel for what's going to be good and what you're going to use and how you're going to play your class as DKs, either Frost or Unholy, depending on which video you guys watch the most of. Of course, there are going to be timestamps down below, so you can switch to the part that you're most interested in, or just go back and watch a part that you're interested in if you watched the video already. So let's just jump right into it, and we'll start with itemization. So of course, we're going to start with the very basics, stat weights. Stat weights are traditional for every aspect of the game. You have gear with stats on them, and some of those stats feel like they are better than others. Ironically, right now that is not the case. In fact, I think the ideal stat distribution for Unholy is a little bit of everything except for crit. So if you were to try and find a best stat, it would be haste, versatility, and mastery. You got three of them, which means you're going to want to have a split of all three. You can see I have 200 haste, 226 verse, and 198 mastery. Those numbers are very, very close to each other. And there's a couple reasons for this. One, they incorporated diminishing returns into secondary stats. So if you get too much of a secondary stat, it loses value. That is a obvious reason why you wouldn't want to overstack a stat. But there are actually other reasons too. First, they buffed bad stats and the way they interact with classes, whether that be adding another effect to your mastery or giving you more procs with crit. And essentially, bad stats are now better for most classes. They did that intentionally, it seems like, to make secondary stats all valuable, so you don't have any pieces of gear that have a stat that's garbage and you get mad that you have a worthless stat on there. In Unholy's case, and you got me hovering over it right now, called Mastery Dreadblade, you got minion damage added to your mastery instead of just shadow damage, and of course you still have that shadow damage component. So first off, that's obviously extremely important. You can see I have 59.75% mastery, so my minions are just gaining 60% damage from my mastery baseline over 0 before, so 60% more damage. That's huge. But also, it actually increases the synergy with other stats. And like I said, you want a mixture of stats. And one of the big contributors to that is the fact that having a lot of one stat actually makes having the other stat more important. So in this case, let's talk about haste and mastery. When mastery was just shadow damage, you had your dot damage being a huge part of that. And Unholy blight damage now, which we'll talk about in the talent section, that would be a big part of that. But those things do not increase in damage from haste. Our dots, unlike boomy dots or shadow priests, don't take more with haste. So you're getting mastery and you're getting more dot damage, but you're not actually getting any synergy with haste. So they are separate to each other. But when mastery increases the damage of your minions, that synergizes perfectly with haste, because if your minions do more damage and haste makes your minions attack faster, then haste making them attack faster gets more iterations of that, more damage. So they synergize well. That is the case with obviously haste and verse already, but now that mastery is in there, mastery output per rating for sheer damage is higher than versatility, so that is a very high output stat now, and mastery and haste synergize very well. But versatility is the king PvP stat. You have the damage output, which is great and tries to be competitive in PvE, so they want to have it do enough damage so it's not a dead stat in PvE. But you also get healing and damage reduction for free, essentially, because if it's fairly competitive in PvE and it fairly competitive increasing your total output in PvP for damage, you also get extremely important things for PvP, which is survivability and healing done from Death Strike or Death Coil, damage reduction. It is no surprise that dying is a bad thing in PvP, and forcing healers' cooldowns is a bad thing, and running out of mana is a bad thing, so having more survivability is good. Versatility, obviously, the king PvP stat, and we've been saying this for years. So, if haste and mastery are good and synergize well for output, and versatility is good because it's a king PvP stat, then what do you arrive at? You arrive at 3 good stats, and there's one other reason why it's so valuable to have a mixture of stats. If you all in for one stat, you are all in for one win condition. So let's talk about that a little bit. What happens if you have 70% haste and nothing else? You have no verse and no mastery. You're squishy, first of all, but your output comes in a very specific window. When you're locked to the target, you have incredibly high uptime, so you can get your rune usage out, you can press Festering Strike, you can press your spenders, you can get your auto attacks that are all increased by your haste. So it's a uptime dependent, very high burst, all in kind of playstyle. So what happens if you get rooted? What happens if you get palled? Your haste all of a sudden drops in value from pretty high to very low. Because now all your pets still get your autos, but you don't get your autos, you're not spending runes, so you're not using the rune generation, you're not using the global cooldown reduction, you're not doing anything. So haste's value drops tremendously in that situation, while masteries and verse still stay pretty high because they increase your dot damage, which is still on them, your pet damage, which was still on them, and versatility increases all your damage, so it's the same thing. So the problem is, when you all in one stat, you're all in one playstyle, and you expose your weaknesses while not really increasing your strengths that much, because people are already trying to peel those burst windows anyway, so it's not like making yourself even more susceptible to doing damage exactly in those burst windows is all that good of a thing. So that is, 4, 5 different reasons why having a mixture of stats is really good, and they're all valid, and all could be the whole reason. But when you put them all together, it's like, okay, get a mixture of stats. I actually did this at the end of BFA for Frost, where I had haste, verse, and mastery, and it became the build that was extremely powerful, and took me to my highest rating ever, obviously, with the 3323, where we sat and got the title. So now that there are so many factors contributing to that being the case, essentially, I think that's what we're going to be doing the entire expansion. So not just in Prepatch right now, which this is a Prepatch guide, but like I'll discuss later in the video, through all of Shadowlands. And that crazy? So instead of saying, hey, what stat do you stack? You'll be like, you won't say anything because you're just going to get all of them except for crit. The reason crit is left out of that situation is because it doesn't have any additional properties. You don't get any procs from crit as Unholy. It's just strictly output. You don't even get extra Death Strike healing because Death Strike healing can't crit. So you don't get extra survivability, like versatility. You don't get extreme output because crit is now nerfed by 25% instead of 50%, but still nerfed, and you don't get procs. So it doesn't do anything extra. It's just an output stat, and it's not that good of one. So it is the odd man out. So when you ask what stats are you stacking, I would say everything but crit. And that's stat weights. So let's talk about some of the borrowed power systems we still have in the game, just for a pre-patch build, because this is to help you get through the period of boringness until Shadowlands comes out. I'm trying to give you guys something you can one-shot with, and these are pretty set in stone. There are 3 good traits: Magus of the Dead, Festermite, and Heart of Darkness for Majors. You can easily run any combination of those. I have 3 Festermites and 3 Magus of the Deads. That is a very, 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 very powerful setup. You can add a Heart of Darkness if you have one. you don't have to. All three of those traits are very good. For the inners, overwhelming power, on my way. They give haste, they give verse. It's good. For the full inners here, Impassive Visage, any healing, Runic Barrier. Same thing it's been all of BFA. I figured I'd touch on it in case anybody is coming back for pre-patch. That is going to be so set in stone. It is going to be the shortest segment I've ever had in one of my videos. If you're new to the game, and you are looking for good traits, Magus of the Dead, Festermind, there's Overwhelming Power, there's a heal, Impassive Visage. Run those. You'll be good. So we could actually just move right on. That's going to be the fastest segment I've ever had into Essences. Essences are the final borrowed power aspect of the game that's left from BFA, as they did remove corruptions, thank the Lord. What we have still here is a splattering of powerful essences that are all good in one way for the most part. A lot of them are still very powerful. But instead of going through all the essences on a system that's just going to be removed in Shadowlands, I'm talking about how each one has an individual use case. I'm going to do something new to this channel. I'm going to talk less, and I'm actually going to just give you the build that I currently run and why it's so good. And the other ones, they're still good, and we can point out at that, but I'm not going to go over each one. So, for Major, Blood of the Enemy, I think it's the best Major in the entire game. Crit is nerfed by less than it was before. It was nerfed by 25% now in PvP instead of 50%. That makes it better. Health pools are very low, so burst windows are very valuable. That makes it better. And it itself does a fair amount of damage while contributing to a ridiculous burst window with like trinkets like Dressed, which we'll talk about in a second, and your APOC burst, to the point where my 3 words that I say the most on my stream are Blood, Dressed, APOC. Oh, they're dead, they're dead! That's all it is. That is my... If you come watch my stream sometime, you will hear that a lot. Especially in 1v2s or sudden burst situations, we have some funny moments. So Blood of the Enemy right now. I've been saying it for a long time, and I'm going to say it again now. Probably the best essence in the game, certainly the best essence for burst windows, certainly the most fun in pre-patch. Now you'll see 2 other minor essences that I've used the entire expansion. Conflict and Strife, which gives versatility, which we said is a great stat. Conflict and Strife minor. Essence of the Focusing Iris minor, that gives haste, which we said is a great stat. There's another good minor. But the one difference is the Crucible of Flame minor. This thing is for some reason completely overtuned. I don't know what changed with PvP scaling or the way the game calculates its damage, but for some reason it is just blatantly overtuned. There is no mechanics to go over for why this is synergistic or valuable with a certain build. It is just overtuned. Every spec in the game should be running it. Every single one. Every spec in the game should be using Crucible of Flame Minor. It is that overtuned. It is regularly 16% of my damage in PvP. I don't know why. That's what overtuning is. The numbers are high because the numbers are high, and you need high numbers to do lots of damage. Those are the minors that I run. Lucid can replace Essence of the Focusing Iris if your games are going longer, because then you'll start running out of runes. The reason I don't run out of runes is because my games go very short. I kill people in the opener. So you can use Lucid if you're playing longer games. Maybe you're playing at higher MMR and you're pushing rating and you get a lot of healer DPS versus healer DPS and the games are actually finally slowing down a little bit. You can switch Lucid for Iris. Breath obviously is missing from this because it just does less damage than Crucible of Flame Minor, and Breath Minor doesn't give you the corruption resistance anymore because you don't have corruption, so that huge important part is gone. There are other good majors. Breath Major, Condense Major, even Crucible Major probably now. There are other good majors, but like I said, the system's leaving us in Shadowlands. Not going to talk any more about it. These essences are what I use to comically one-shot people in Arena frequently and carry people to ratings they've never been to. So I'm certain that'll work for you guys too. Blood Major, Conflict Minor, Essence Minor, Crucible of Flame. That's a non-negotiable, by the way. Crucible of Flame Minor, non-negotiable. Okay. We're plowing right through this. This is itemization, boys. This is how it works. You create an entire set of powerful things, and as a result, you're milking the most power out of your character that you can. And we're going to finish off with 2 things. That's Runeforges, and that's trinkets and your weapon. Because we've already gone through every other piece of gear. You might think, well, what pieces of gear am I looking for? Well, that doesn't matter. The pieces with the stats that I said were good, and the pieces with the traits that I said were good, the cloak and the necklace are guaranteed, so all that's left is weapons and trinkets. So, this guy, best trinket in the entire game. The only thing that's even close is Claw, but Claw is worse because this is the same damage but instant, and it's not dispellable. It is so overwhelmingly overtuned. It is not even close. Drestigath, best trinket in the entire game. Don't even bother with anything else. If you have this, put it on. If it's a lower item level, probably put it on anyway, and just cry that it's not my mythic one, because my mythic one is really good. That is the best trinket in the entire game. You could use another on use with it, but games go really fast, so I tend to use a proc trinket. This one is the one that I love because it gives you Verse, which buffs your Dressed, and Verse is a great stat and gives you an on-proc that lasts for a long time. So through your burst window, when it procs, you're just nuking people with bursting your wounds, and your pets, and your disease, and all those things that gain damage from having more strength. It's just an overall good trinket. I've been using it the entire expansion, and I'm not going to stop now. For some alternatives, because I know that not everybody has a Drestigath trinket, you can use a different on-use that does damage, like a wheel, the remote guidance device. I don't have it, because I would have no need for it, because Dressed is just better. But you know it, the wheel from Mechagon. Or you could use a badge, which gives you primary stat on use. That is your on-use choices. Those are the best ones by far. Gives you Verse, gives you primary stat, or gives you damage. Those are your on-use choices. Nothing else I would really fit in there. If you're so under-geared that you have none of those choices, then you're not really that worried about perfectly optimizing yourself because you're extremely under-geared, and that's your problem. You need more gear. You need to go find pieces. For your on-proc, if you have anything else that just procs a stat and gives you Verse or Haste or Mastery on it baseline, that's fine. They're all the same thing. Insignia is just the choice I use because it's perfect for that exact situation. Finally, weapon. Gatikus. Not as good now, not as required. Any stat weapon is absolutely fine if it has the stats that you need, or a high item level Gatikos is fine, but it's not absolutely required now. And I will go in a brief explanation of why, and it should make total sense once I finish. PvP scaling in the game. Ever heard of it? Watched Rextroy before? Yeah, it's a big deal. Not in the game anymore. It was in the game in the in BFA. What that did is it brought all of your primary stats down regarding the item level difference between you and the opponent you were attacking. So, if all your stats were scaled downward to adjust you for that huge power gap that would be in between you and your opponent because of item level, then that means all of your abilities are doing less damage. Period. Everything's doing less damage. Except Gatiku's damage does not scale with your primary stat at all. Its damage is only scaling with exactly versatility, so like the 20% you get from versatility, but not the immense amount that you get from all your primary stats making all of your damage hit harder. So when everything is scaled down, Gatiku stays relatively the same. What does that mean? It means Gatiku's is doing a higher percentage of your damage, because everything else comes down, Gatiku stays the same. Now they're close. So that's why you always saw Gatikus doing so much percentage of your damage, because of PvP scaling. And that's what they were trying to accomplish with PvP scaling, was normalize people to a closer amount so gear didn't destroy everybody. Obviously there are so many problems, highlighted by your boy Rextroy, that it seemed like they scrapped the system. We'll see what goes on in Shadowlands, but for right now, there is none of that. The damage you do seems like the damage you do, and as a result, Gatiku's is a much smaller portion of your damage. Is it trash? Not entirely, but it's just not god tier, so you can use any weapon that gives you stats, or a very high item level Gatiku if you have one. Boom. That covers every single slot on your character with what you should be doing with it. It covers everything for itemization. So using those tips, or armoring Flarkness - Stormrage, and looking at these pieces and saying, okay, that's what I'm going to look for, and that's what I'm going to try and get. You know the reasons why you're trying to get them, so you can just find whatever replacement pieces you need. More things than just my legs have haste and verse on them, so now you have an entire set of items and gear that you can use to dominate. We're going to finish off itemization with Runeforging. I'll bring that right up. You may have seen me hover over my Gatikus and saw that I was running Sanguination. So we'll talk about that one first as we pull this little menu up. Sanguination. I play double DPS 2s, and I do 2s carries and 2s coaching on my stream. That is all I do right now, and when you don't have a healer, notated by the double DPS 2s, then healing becomes a lot more valuable, because if you can live a little longer, then you guys might be able to net that kill. So, I'm using Sanguination. Sanguination is fantastic for that purpose, all players playing double DPS 2s, and for duels. It is disgustingly good in duels. Healing for 48% of your maximum health is massive, and that is very good for stabilizing and for trying to finish somebody off. So for duels, double DPS 2s, Sanguination, OP. What about the other ones? What about the other situations? Well, for general use, for 3s and healer DPS 2s, it seems like Fallen Crusader and Apocalypse are pulling ahead for general use. Apocalypse gives you extra damage, it gives you damage reduction, it gives you Immortal Strike, which is really good if you don't have one on your comp. It's a really good sustained value Runeforge. It is kind of always valuable, and it's actually very powerful for that effect. Fallen Crusader, of course, gives you strength, which is just your bread and butter, and it gives you healing, and actually strength increases your death coil healing when you're in Lichborn, which we'll talk about later. So that actually gives you more healing. So it's just a really good, also sustained Runeforge option. And better if you don't have a Mortal Strike, or if you already have a Mortal Strike rather, because the Mortal Strike then from Apocalypse is not valuable. So those are the two general use ones. I think, if to be very, very competitive, you could grab another weapon and just put Rune of Spellwarding on it, and put another weapon with Rune of Sanguination in your bags. And these will be what's called your tech choices. You queue into a Wizard Cleave, use the Rune of Spellwarding. It's a tech option when you queue into double Wizard. If you're queuing into something that farms you that isn't double Wizard, like a jungle that just seems to shred DK because they have a lot of bleeds that go through your big plate armor, and you're dying a lot to that comp, Rune of Sanguination is your tech option. And there you go. So if you're trying to be super tryhard, you can have a weapon with a general use Runeforge, a spell reduction Runeforge, and Sanguination for self-healing Runeforge, and you have an option. Just like Talents, you can swap it in the lobby. Not during the game because of that change they made to Runeforge swapping, but in the lobby before the game starts, and thus have a tech option into the comp that you're queuing into, because you get to see the comp in the lobby. That are my thoughts on Runeforging. Razor Ice is obviously for Frost. Hysteria is absolute dog shit. And Rune of Unending Thirst is for questing. So that would be my thoughts on Runeforging. You have two general use, two tech options. Use all of them by being clever and super tryhard and getting extra weapons. Two-handed weapons for Unholy. And that, my friends, is everything I have learned about itemization in Prepatch. Now you can build your character perfectly, as I do, to win games handily and blow people up with this hysterical trinket. So let's move on to talents. So, with talents here, we've got immense changes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each line, and I'm going to talk about the line as a whole, and then why I picked what I pick. And then I'm going to go to PvP talents, and that will do it. First line. Everything in this line is pretty good. Infected Claws is pretty good. It applies a wound to your target. When Necro Strike was so overwhelmingly strong, this became better. Now it's not quite as good, but when you don't have obscene haste levels, it's still good to reset the duration of your wounds and apply wounds at a range, and always have wound generation for the enemy. Free wound generation. It's pretty good. All Will Serve is pretty good. It adds additional chip damage that scales with your mastery, and is decent for if they kite you and they're about to die. It can net a kill somehow. All Will Serve is just pretty good. Clawing Shadows is also pretty good. But the reason I chose this one specifically is because it makes your spender completely scale with your mastery and be fully ranged, which is really good utility when you're getting kited. Frost mages have 9-second roots now, so it's nice against that, especially when A-bomb, we'll talk about that later of course, is applying wounds at a range. You can spend them at a range with Clawing Shadows. So it's very powerful as it ignores armor, scales with your mastery, gives you extra utility. They're all good. I chose Clawing Shadows for that reason. Next row. Bursting Sores, Even Fever, and Unholy Blight are all good. Bursting Sores adds some additional sustained damage to Bursting Wounds. It drives a good amount of pressure into Apocalypse, which bursts 4 wounds, and it is disgusting cleave pressure. Because the AoE dealing shadow damage to all targets nearby is only cleave, it's not to your main target, and it does scale with your mastery, of course. So, Bursting Swords, great option into double melee meta, just to cleave the crap out of things. You also destroy pets with it, and pets are actually susceptible to dying right now with low health pools. So, Bursting Swords, fantastic at cleaving down pets or cleaving down double melee. Even Fever, super easy to use, takes away a button. Pretty decent sustained damage. You have Raise A-Bomb as a source of Outbreak, so it's easy to reapply Virulent Plague, even though it cuts off half the duration, so you're reapplying it more. Just some good sustained damage, and very easy to use. It's fine. Unholy Blight, also good. The reason I chose it is because it adds another source of damage, because you have that disease that stacks up 4 times. It starts pumping, and it scales with your mastery. And it also increases your minions' damage, and they scale with your mastery. And that adds more sources to your damage, because your pets are now going off even harder. So when you press Unholy Blight, it's like all of a sudden you just have all of this damage from different types of sources, so it's more difficult to peel, because that stuff is already going, it's already on them. It's not like just CCing you or slowing you down is enough. And that's what Unholy does so well right now. So Unholy Blight is the one that I chose for that reason. Good pressure every time it's up, especially AoE pressure, and it destroys pets too. This talent line is so obvious. Grip of the Dead and Death's Reach are trash. Asphyxiate is the only thing playable. This talent line is very interesting. Pestilent is what I used to use all of BFA. It's just free passive rune generation. You don't even need to spend a global. Not quite as powerful now that we're not rocking like 60% haste. Or that Necrotic Strike isn't the only button that ever matters. So it lost a little value in my heart for that one. Still fine for passive rune generation. I'm going to go over to Soul Reaper. This one is extremely important because it is not rune generation on a rune generation tier, which means it's competing rune generation with a rune spender that does execute damage. That's totally bizarre and bonkers, but that's what they did, and that's kind of cool. That said, Prepatch is very spiky in health pools. Have you ever played against a Ret? They will one-shot you, and they will lay on hands themselves over and over and over. Your health goes down and up and down and up and down and up and down and down, up. A timing-based executability that's not even like a guaranteed finisher is not that important in this current meta. But when health pools are so much less slingshotty, and hopefully in Shadowlands, and things slow down a little bit, Soul Reaper could definitely pick up some value as a reliable, powerful execute that scales with your mastery and necrotic aura and ignores armor. It can be very powerful. Right now, a little too slingshotty. Harbinger of Doom has traditionally been a meme, but right now in this row it's actually very powerful. And it's because of the weird extra utility it gives you. It gives you a free proc, which can proc Runic Corruption, which helps you with your rune generation. It also gives you a free proc which does damage. Death Coil does damage, and that's just powerful. But you can also accumulate 2 charges, which means you can do like a sudden burst, which is kind of nice. It's not that important. But you can also pool them, pop Lichborn, which everybody has baseline. Let's take a look at our Lichborn real quick. Become undead, and spam 2 proc Lichborn Death Coils into your Lichborn to heal yourself immediately, and then spend the rest of your runic power, and all of a sudden you've got 4 Lichborns or 4 Lichborn heals because of Harbinger of Doom. That is like 16k healing, and could be a full heal when coupled with other effects. that is extraordinarily powerful and is much more viable with Harbinger of Doom because you can store 2 charges and you get it to proc more. So you can literally just sit on your coil charges, your Sudden Doom, and just sit on it and never press it if you're taking a lot of damage, and then fire off all of that in a Lichborn and heal yourself to full. So it has damage component, it has rune generation component, and it has immense self-healing component, and the utility of that, plus a couple of other synergies that you'll see down later in the talents down here, make it just very, very good talent pick and just better than the other ones for right now. So that is why I'm running that talent. This row, every talent is good. We'll talk with Spell Eater first because it's the one I've used forever and ever and ever. And my thoughts are the same. It prevents CC. It's pretty good for survivability. It is not quite as overbearing now because when everybody had corruptions like Gushing Wound, spell damage, Lash the Void, spell damage, that was way more important for you to be able to do more magic damage reduction because everybody had magic damage. That's no longer the case. Still extremely good for preventing CC and preventing damage against spellcasters, or DKs who have a lot of magic damage, or Demon Hunters who have chaos damage. Wraithwalk is obvious. It's mobility. If you need mobility, use it. If you see a Frost Mage and you're like, I just can't ever get to anybody, I'm going to talent it to Wraithwalk. You can change that in the lobby. You have that choice to make. Death Pact is the most polarizing talent. Sometimes it is absolute gutter trash and completely unusable, and sometimes it is very, very viable and actually pretty powerful. This is because when the game is very bursty, and if you live a burst you can win the game, Death Pact is good. But when the game is very sustained damage heavy, Death Pact is trash. Because Death Pact heals you once in 2 minutes, and if people just are always killing each other, then that little, oh, I'm alive, well, now I'm dead again, that's all it did. Sustained healing is so much better. Also, if games are going to dampener, like in 3s, they're going to dampening, the healing from Death Pact gets dampened, but the healing absorption from Death Pact, the drawback, does not get dampened. So if you're having a sustained, slow-paced meta, where people can live for a long time with self-healing, Death Pact loses all of its value, because you're going into dampening, and it just effectively doesn't matter anymore. But right now, damage is very spiky, people are getting blown up, burst is extremely important, and living that burst is extremely important, which makes Death Pact a good choice into all the things that Spell Eater is a bad choice into. Warriors, physical damage. Sub-rogues, physical damage. Outlaw rogues, physical damage. Windwalker monks, physical damage. Death Pact is a good choice into those things. Whew. Next row. Unholy Pact. Defile and Pestilence are completely worthless memes. Unholy Pact gives you more strength and does some AoE damage, some really good AoE damage. It's like putting one of your better talents against 2 talents that say, do nothing, and a little clown face, and like blowing confetti. Do nothing. The end. I don't know how this is even a choice. I don't. I have no description for this line right now. Maybe things will change in Shadowlands. The end. This line, Army of the Damned, and Summon Gargoyle, and Unholy Assault are all good. So that's a problem, right? And here's why. Army of the Damned is really powerful, because now they baked in the Magus of the Dead for it, and you already have Magus of the Dead for your traits, so right now it's pretty comical. You have tons of them out, and that's very powerful, but it also reduces the cooldown on the abilities that summon the Magus of the Dead, and also do great damage on their own, like Raise A-Bomb and Apocalypse. So you're getting more Maguses, which give you more Maguses, which give you... also, you get more damage, and you get more wound generation from Raise A-Bomb, and the wound generation from A-Bomb gives you Apocalypse easy, and it's just like this very synergistic talent that also synergizes with Harbinger of Doom, because Sudden Doom gives you a Death Coil, and Death Coil is what procs Army of the Damned. So it's like this really, really powerful sustain, burst, everything talent that just synergizes with your entire toolkit. That's really good, hard to ignore. But remember, that's competing with the standard of Unholy Frenzy that everybody used, which is now called Unholy Assault, which sends you into an Unholy Frenzy, which still gives you 20% haste, which is a ton, and just remarkably valuable for increasing your pet damage, your global cooldowns. We've already talked about haste, it's great. But also, having it do damage and apply wounds means it adds to that one-shot combo where you go Blood, Unholy Assault, APOC, Dressed, and you're just hitting big hit after big hit after big hit, and then sending all your pets on them with 20% extra haste, so all your pets are now doing additional damage from that APOC window. I mean, it's just great. So I talked about all the great things that Army of the Damned did and all the synergies, and then you look at this and it's like, wait, it's amazing too, and it has all those synergies. And that's the problem. Gargoyle, on the other hand, was underplayed in BFA for sure. I actually memed with it with a 70% haste build, made it really good with that build, which was a lot of fun. If you ever watched my stream, you got to seen some of those games. But actually synergizes great with Harbinger as well, because the free procs you get count as spending runic power. So free procs actually are an entire death coil worth of Gargoyle increased damage. So good synergy there. It's 30 seconds, which gives you a ton of time to build it up. And with all of the sources of sustained damage and your master increasing your minions' damage, you could make a build where you have Unholy Blight out, which also increases your minion damage, more damage for Gargoyle. Unholy Blight out, A-Bomb out, APOC down, Clawing Shadows, you're spamming that with your A-Bomb, and you have Gargoyle out, and you are like full Necromancer, dude. You're hitting, and it's not even a meme, too, because I tried it in twos, and we slaughtered this team. I was playing HPAL DK, we just ran them over. You have so many sources of damage that you're just always, it's impossible to peel you. You're just always doing an enormous amount of damage. It's very, very difficult to deal with. And because it lasts for 30 seconds, it's not just like 10 seconds where they just have to line the Gargoyle. I mean, you're going to get into range of them. You're going to build that Gargoyle's damage with your Death Coil procs from Harbinger. And by the end of it, it's a nuke. It's actually powerful, especially if you drop Unholy Blight onto the end of this build-up window. So that's kind of cool. We have a lot of rows where all three of the talents are viable, and I think they've been striving for that since the system was released in MOP. I think that's a really good effort from Blizzard, honestly. I think it's really good. This line is the only one that's so comical that it still makes me laugh a little bit, of course, but the amount of work that they've done to improve the overall system that they have here is a thumbs up. So really well done. The reason I have my exact talent line is because those are the most synergistic that I feel complements my playstyle the most. I switch to Unholy Assault a lot. I'm so torn that the whole line, I'm very torn, but this right now, I'm just going to take my hands off the keyboard, just look at it one more time. Clawing Shadows, Unholy Blight, Asphyxiate, Harbinger, Spell Eater, or these two, Unholy Pact, and Army is a very synergistic, very powerful, destructive in twos playstyle. If I just gave you a cookie cutter build, it wouldn't be a Flark video. I gotta explain how these talents aren't the only talent that matter, and how situational choices immensely matter in PvP. Otherwise, I would just be giving you a, hey, what's up, guys? Okay, I won't do it. Alright, PvP talents. Raise A-Bomb was powerful all of BFA. It's powerful now. It gives you the ability to generate an enormous amount of wounds for free. It applies Plague, which is great. It's fantastic for pulling out stealthies. It does some damage on its own, which is increased by Unholy Blight. Just a standard, very powerful PvP talent. So what's missing from these? That. Necrotic Strike is missing from these. Healing absorption is always going to be powerful, but the problem with Necrotic Strike is that 4% number that you can see on the screen right now. 4% of a target's maximum health. Why did they nerf it to 4%? Because BFA health pools were massive. You get all of these modifiers, and the Azerite Traits giving huge stamina, and the neck giving you huge stamina bonuses. So as a like ratio of damage that you could do with your abilities to health of a player, each individual ability was smaller as a portion of your total health than it is now. People are smashing with like near one-shots. So 4% is now a very, very small number. So they nerfed that for BFA. We're not playing BFA right now, we're playing Prepatch, and eventually we'll be playing Shadowlands. So that nerf took it out of contention for right now. They will have to buff it back up as a result of the changing health pools for it to be viable. If they do not change this talent, it will not be good. Plain and simple. So what do you run in its place? All of those other situational PvP talents that we've talked about exclusively and extensively in BFA. You have Necrotic Aura. It's just good. You do a lot of magic damage. Your partner may do some magic damage, just a good one. Decomp actually could see some value. I use it in 2s all the time. Reducing somebody's max health when they already have so little health to damage already makes them die very fast. And even if they top themselves, because like I said, what did I say before? Slingshotty. You go from high health to low health to high health to low health. You're just back and forth. So if the amount of health you heal yourself to when you top yourself is lower, you're immediately getting in trouble again. That's what health reduction talents or abilities do. They make it so you're always in trouble, and even if you top yourself, you're still in a little bit of trouble because you have less health than you should have when you're generally topped. So in a slingshotty meta, decomp is very, very powerful. Of course, I'll go through it one more time, very quickly. Dome, now you have zone baseline, we know this, here it is, okay? Dome is what AMZ used to be, except now it's buffed by 10%, so it is a complete shutdown of wizards. Use it against wizards. Use it against rogue mage. Use it against Ellie warrior simply because Ellie's one-shot you, and warriors don't have any magic damage, but it doesn't matter because the Ellies can one-shot you. That's AMZ. That's Dome of the Ancient Shadow. Transfusion. Huge self-sustain. Generates some runic power. Just a good tool with sanguination for sure. There's sanguination. Just a good tool when you synergize those two things for if you are the target, that helps you live. That you say, these guys have gone me over and over again, I hate dying. I'm going to run transfusion, and I'm going to put on my Rune of Sanguination weapon, and I'm going to live. That's what that does. Necro Bargain, I think, is a trap. It was a trap for most of BFA. I called that. Some people didn't listen. I'm pretty sure it's bad. The pets that you get from APOC now do even more damage because they scale with your mastery, and they scale with Unholy Blight. So losing those pets for a health percentage-based damage, which is really bad because people have low health pools, is a trap. I know you can pair it with Army of the Dead and Vision of Perfection, and you can get crazy APOCs out, but you can also kill people in all sorts of ways, and I think that one is just a trap. It is a PvP talent for like a variable, maybe a negative, maybe a positive, could be funny sustained damage where you have a lot of maguses, but you also lose your army that does a fair amount of damage in your burst windows. It is when you put everything together, it's like a really, really potent talent, and that it makes things very short cooldown. You can really feel that, but I'm not sure how valuable it is. It's a tough call. I think it's less of a trap with all those things now, especially since Army is so much better now. I think it's less of a trap now, but I think it's still a trap. Check for this to change in Shadowlands. Remember, this is a pre-patch guide. If health pools are higher and damage is less slingshotty, so that sustained damage is valuable, then the crazy build where you can get tons of maguses out from Army of the Damned and Harbinger and have all those things together may end up being pretty decent. Check for it to change. I think it's a trap now. Cadaverous Pauler is the most niche pick. It is completely destructive to spell cleaves when they are going you, but it doesn't help your teammate like Dome of the Ancient Shadow does. So if you're like, okay, this wizard cleave has always gone me every time, I'm going to run spell warding, remember? I'm going to run spell warding the Runeforge, my weapon with spell warding on it, in Cadaverous Pauler, and I'm going to be immune to everything they try and do to me. That is so much spell hate that combined with Spell Eater and AMS, I think you are impossible to kill. If you ever die, it's on you, dude. That's your fault. Cadaverous is a hard counter to that. Reanimation is a meme. Necrotic Strike we talked about. Dark Sim is so fun. Now you have a free talent because you're not using Necrotic Strike, but you don't really because you got Necrotic Strike from Conflict, which you were using anyway. Oh well. Dark Sim, though, very, very cool. You can steal a G-Buy, still. Even though it's on a cooldown, you can still steal one. You can steal Fierce, Polys. You can steal huge heals, you can steal Cocoon, you can steal fun H-Pal things. It's all of what it used to be. Fantastic, high skill cap, high awareness requirement, PvP talent. Life and Death is only good in RBGs. You can use this talent in RBGs. We did it. We did it. That is everything to build your character through talents and itemization to play at the capacity that I play at. The only thing you're missing, of course, is the button presses. So let's talk about those really briefly in gameplay, current pre-patch gameplay. So damage is very, very, very spiky, as I've talked about 10 times, especially red. Have you ever queued into one? They nuke you. It's ridiculous. Shadow Priest can actually do the same thing. A lot of things can, sub-rogues. So you need to get your damage out early. So remember all that I've always talked about in my prior videos about dropping your setup globals early? You still have those. It's called Raise A-Bomb, Unholy Blight, Dark Transform. So as you are walking to the target, you start over here, you're getting to your target, you want to set up on somebody. You don't want to just press those 3 no damage globals when you're trying to start doing damage, because they're going to tap you with the Templar's Verdict, and you're going to be like, well, I wish I could do that. You got to get your setup globals out quick. So you're walking over there, you're standing over here. Here's the enemy team. There's your rep pally that's trying to one-shot you. Raise A-Bomb comes down, Unholy Frenzy comes down, Dark Transform comes down. You see how I pressed those 3 globals and then got to them? Then when you get to them, you're going to press a single Festering Strike, and then you're going to press, because of the wound generation from Raise Abomination, you're going to have 4 of these wounds on them. You're going to press Apocalypse. That is the same thing that I've talked about so many times in these videos, but it is so crucial now that I might as well go through it again. So I will wait for my cooldowns to come back up and show you kind of what that looks like. But that's the importance of setup globals. That is how everybody asks me when I stream. I'm like, what are you doing to do that much damage instantly? You just one-shot them. I'm like, it's really important to get the abilities that do so much damage out before you get to the target or before you're trying to burst somebody. It doesn't have to be from across the map, but before you're trying to burst, make sure you've got those setup globals out. Because otherwise, when you start trying to burst, you're going to be like, oh crap, there's 3 globals that don't do any damage. That's not burst, that's nothing. So when I get to them, I press that 1 Fester, the APOC, the Blood, the Drestigath Trinket, and I start spamming my Spender, and it is just constant, instant damage. I've said that in a lot of videos. I have to say it one more time for the people who are new to the game coming pre-patch. That is so, so important to how I one-shot people in this game. So yeah, now we have those abilities up, so I'll just show you what it's looking like. So let's see, there's a mage over there, and I'm trying to get a good opener on the mage. So I drop Raise A-Bomb, got the Frenzy, Dark Transform, 1 Fester Strike, Blood, Dressed, APOC. Now they are probably dead, honestly, but you can start spending your wounds now. You can see I have Generation without pressing Fester Strike. Look at the buttons I'm pressing. Clawing Shadows, and then now I had to press my first Festering Strike. So that was, what, 10, 15, 18 seconds in to my burst window before I used my generator even 1 time. And it's literally just 1 time. That was 1 time, right? I pressed 2 Fester Strikes in total, 1 to start the burst and then 1 for a generation. 2 Fester Strikes, 11 Clawing Shadows. That's how it should look. That's the burst window. So what else, but what really changed in your gameplay? Well, Unholy Blight replaced Unholy Friends, if you elect to go that way. You can also put Unholy Assault into that window, and it'll replace the Festering Strike, the first Festering Strike. You got Lichborn. Lichborn is ridiculous, because they nerfed Death Strike's healing in PvP, and like I said, you can pool Death Coils from Sudden Doom, or if you're not running Sudden Doom, you can still pool 1 Death Coil. And when you get, let's get a proc, when you get low, I'll sit here until I get a proc and I'll generate, see, I'll have Runic, so I'm like pooling Runic because I know that they're bursting me. There's a proc, press Lichborn, I start spamming Death Coils on myself. See this? So all of that Runic power drain was Death Coils onto myself. Let me pull this up into the middle of the screen. 3k overhealed, 2.6k overhealed, 2.6k overhealed. That all scales with strength. And it scales with all your modifiers. So if you are bursting and you have like more strength up and you have a trinket proc, then your death coil is going to heal for more. So you can heal yourself for more. And you can like burst heal as well as burst damage. So that Lichborn and then self death coil is obviously a macro, right? We've known that macro from the WoD days, but if you're new to the game, it is /cast target equals your own name death coil. Simplest thing to write of all time. You are casting with a target of yourself the death coil ability. You just spam it and it will heal you. And that is a really important tool because Death Strike was nerfed. And Lichborn heals don't require you to be standing on top of somebody. You can heal yourself behind a pillar. You can top yourself when you are kiting. It is just really, really powerful to be able to Lichborn heal. So anytime you have Lichborn up and you know you're in trouble, pool those death coils, procs, pool some runic power, pop Lichborn, and death coil yourself over and over with a trinket proc or a trinket on use, because that makes it even higher. It's pretty good. That said, death coil has another, Lichborn has another function, right? It has, let's find, here we go. It has another function. It gives you leech, which gives you some healing, and it makes you immune to charm, fear, and sleep. That's mind control, that's lock fears, that's priest fears, that's succubus sleep. That's a lot of things. So there are going to be times where you're not going to use Lichborn to heal yourself. You're going to use it to get one out of one of those CC effects. What times are those? When you can get a kill. So you're feared, and you're 5-second feared, and your partner just dispelled, or he's getting trained LOS and you need to peel for him, or you're just about to kill somebody and you literally can't even wait for the global. Pop Lichborn, finish it off. The other time, of course, is you kind of, maybe you can dual facet it. If you're in a fear and you're also dying, you could Lichborn and then start spamming healing on yourself, and you can get both uses out of that. Because people can fear you with dots on you and the fear won't break and you'll still be taking a ton of damage. That's a scary situation to be in. This is what's called a situational ability. We talk about a lot of those in these YouTube videos that I make. Not everything is cookie cutter. Actually, nothing is cookie cutter. Nothing's set in stone. Everything is situational. So read your abilities very carefully that you got from Shadowlands. Make sure you know what's going on. Death Coil heals heal more than Death Strike heals. But you can only use it once every 2 minutes, and it's really powerful if you pool the free ones because that's free healing. It's like a Death Strike proc. Okay, IBF is the same, and AMS is the same. They're dual faceted. You can use them defensively, you can use them offensively. IBF to get out of a stun to kill somebody, or to stay aggressive. If you're taking damage and you're in a stun, you can stay aggressive while reducing the damage and not being in a stun so they don't just kill you. AMS is the same way. You can prevent incoming CC, and if you're taking damage at the time, like you can prevent a coil if you're taking damage at the time, then you're also AMSing that damage. If you're about to get feared and they're going to kill you in the fear with dots or mind controlled, you can AMS those CCs. If you're about to kill or you're literally not the target at all, you can pre-AMS CCs. That's playing it aggressively. That's AMSing aggressively. Or if you know you're susceptible to being swapped on and the comp has killed you in the past, you hold AMS, you do not press it aggressively to get out of CC, and you hold it for when you're in trouble and your healer says, I got nothing, and he says, use AMS, you use AMS. That's situational usage of your abilities. Everything else, we have it. We have zone baseline now. It's only 20%, but a 20% wall for spellcasters, not bad. Just use it before you get low. If you're using the 20% one, don't use it at 20% health. It's not going to do anything. You want to use it to prevent damage. Use it at like 60% health on enemy cooldowns. But that means you're probably going to be using Dome, and you're trying to prevent a combustion, or, I don't know, whatever Shadow Priests do. Destroy you. Everything that they have going on, Claw and Devouring Plague. Everything else is very similar. It's the same exact playstyle as BFA, where you generate wounds and you spend wounds. I'm not going to go over the PVE rotation with you guys. Hope you know it by now, but same stuff as before. Proper chains management, keep people slowed. Don't just chains when they get away, pre-chains them so they can't get away. Keep chains on everything. Use AMS and IBF correctly. Lichborn to heal yourself or to finish off a kill. Get a lot of tools. Unholy is really cool right now. It's extremely powerful. and fun. So that brings us to our final section. You guys made it this far? Probably not. I mean, I'm talking to myself right now. This is a video that I'm uploading, so it's very possible that everybody's clicked away by now. But if you actually care enough about the words that I'm saying to get this far, you are a stronger man than I am. But I appreciate you. And our final subject is Shadowlands. Thoughts on Shadowlands. I'm not going to go too in-depth about this because the game is susceptible to tuning and to buffs for certain classes or nerfs for other classes, and all the changes to the covenants and the legendaries, and all of this borrowed power system is going to be changed dramatically. From now until whenever. And that's always the case. I mean, it's changed, what, 10 times since the first time I was thinking about making this video, so that's not really worth talking about. But some general things that are worth talking about are like Unholy versus Frost, and how good is Unholy going to be, and what is Unholy looking like playstyle, what kind of comps do you want to play, and those are good questions. So first, I think Unholy is going to be above average in Shadowlands Season 1. That's because you're not going to have all these secondary stats that you have right now that make these percentages very high. You're going to be pretty sluggish. You're not going to have that much haste. All of these setup globals are going to feel much slower, and it's going to be more difficult to get out your burst windows without getting CC'd during them, because you're slower on your haste and you're slow on your globals. As a result of that, it might feel like you're a very high sustain damage, but it's hard for you to work in those burst windows that can generate kills sometimes. Which means you might want to play with a caster. Unholy DK S-Priest was an extremely powerful comp in BFA, and Shadow Priest is now disgusting. So, and you do a lot of sustained damage, and they do a lot of sustained damage, and that's what you both prioritize right now. So, Unholy DK S-Priest could be a tier S, a above 1, higher than tier 1 comp. Like, just so good. Playing with melees again might feel a little bizarre because your output is not as bursty as Frost might be as a result of that sluggish opener. And it might be that Frost ends up being king in melee cleaves again like it was at the end of BFA Season 4. Obviously, that's what I played to my 33-23. It was a melee cleave with Frost, and so did most of the DKs playing melee cleaves at the top of the ladder. In fact, not most, all of them. Unholy DK S-Priest was played at the top of the ladder, but the other DKs played Frost melee cleaves. So that could be the same thing. So you could play Unholy DK Destro, which seems to actually be very good, because Destro is just extremely powerful, as per usual, and so is Shadow Priest. So those are, I think you might play with casters. You might even play with Affliction Lock to rot people, sustain damage, constant damage, difficult to peel damage, pets, diseases, rot. Those are the kind of thing. Apocalypse, Rune of Apocalypse that we talked about. The Runeforge gives you Immortal Strike for those cleaves, and just even more sustained damage and more utility and disruption. Those are the type of comps I think Unholy is going to be very good with Shadowlands Season 1. As you add more secondary stats by going further in the expansion and the gear gets higher item level, I think that you might open up more burst-heavy comps. And the comps that you're already playing might just get even better. Because now you have burst and sustained, and they might be overpowered. You might see a nerf to Unholy, or maybe there's some other stuff that's so over the top that it's just better, like Warrior Shadow Priest or Rogue Shadow Priest, like Peekaboo always plays. So that is my synopsis, I think, my brief synopsis on what I think is going to be good. And Unholy, I think it's going to be a little sluggish, but still a lot of sources of damage, so very high sustain in Shadowlands Season 1. And thus it'll play with other classes that prioritize that. Aflock, Shadow Priest, Destrolock. Not certain of this. That's why I hesitate on making these types of videos at all. If there is a melee with very high sustained pressure, like maybe TSG makes a comeback because of the Mortal Strike and the Sharpened Blade, and Warriors have a lot of sustained pressure, that could also be valuable. But the setup burst, like Windwalker and DH, I don't see it. I don't see it. I think Frost would be better in every single way for those comps. I don't see it. So I don't think Unholy is going to be bad. I just think it's going to play with certain comps, just like every class and spec in the game, except for probably Mage that can play with everybody for some reason, and so can Warlocks. But anyway, I think those are the types of comps that would be very good for it. I think bursty setup comps are not going to be so good. I think that might change as Shadowlands progresses. Other predictions for Shadowlands, I'm going to hold off. I know you guys have been asking me what Covenant is the best for so long, and I get it on my stream all the time, and I'm sorry that I'm not going to answer that question here. Experimentation is extremely important. I tell a story a lot about how a few named very good players who are some of the best players in the world talked about, like, when Essences were first coming out, like they were 2 months away or a month away or something, how Unbound Force seemed like this crazy overpowered burst window that was just going to get nerfed immediately because it was too good. It ended up never being touched by any person ever, and those were fantastic players. That's because sometimes practice and experimentation is much more valuable than in paper. And with the Covenants, that is really, really important. They have too much going on, and the borrowed power systems have too much going on for me to make some obviously probably inaccurate prediction. Sorry. Unfortunately, that's actually where I'm going to close the video too. But there you go. That's my entire build, pretty set in stone, so at least I might not have given you what you want with the Covenants, but you got a build that I literally nuke people with every day. Like, I stream every day, and I do Twos coaching, and we one-shot 100 people a day. So this build, you're going to love it. The PvP talents and the situational choices, you should have good fun with it. The Runeforges and the itemization that I outlined, you should have a ton of fun with that. And those are some of my thoughts about Shadowlands and what's going to go on. Holy should be good. I just don't know if it's going to play Windwalker DK and be good. I think it's going to play Unholy DK Shadow Priest and be good. Those types of comps. If you made it this far, I love you. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and hope you have a good pre-patch. Thanks. Peace.